have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
And we are live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10. This is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Vicky Davis is here as well. It is the 11th of July, 2020, as we once again document all of the insanity of our republic and the decline of our country, as we see it everywhere, all over the place, filled with traitors, filled with communist infiltrators, and traitors completely, just point-blank traitors. We are in a mess today, and the American people need to wake up to that reality. Unfortunately, you're not going to get that reality from most of the major media. There are few and far between, but as always, mostly the alternative media has been the beacon of truth. And, you know, that's not to say that there aren't those in the alternative media that lead you astray as well. So you got to watch out for that. There are many who like to sensationalize things for ratings and for clicks, and we are certainly not those types of people here. We do the best we can to be credible and spread credible information. Anyway, good morning, Vicky. How you doing?
Good morning, Darren. Surviving. It's so difficult to deal with the psychological warfare. You know, the things that are offensive, things that happen that are offensive to the very core of our beliefs, you know, that all people are created equal. But you wouldn't know that, you know, by the stories that they're telling in the media,
right,
and everywhere. And the most frightening part of it is that it seems that our public officials don't believe it either.
Well, when you were saying all people are created equal, it reminded me of that quote from Animal Farm, George Orwell's Animal Farm, where it says all are created equal, but some are more equal than others.
Yeah, and that's precisely what it is, isn't it?
Yeah, we have a class of people that are being promoted, and the sad part about it is even these people, they don't understand that they're being exploited. And I said this last week, and I'm going to hammer this point home for people to realize that this is a communist movement masquerading as a civil rights movement. The people that are attacking everything, they're being exploited. These people are being used. As a matter of fact, there are websites that are advertising crowds of people that you can get. You can hire these crowds of people. As we go along, I'll see if I can find that website. But there are crowds of people. I think. I might have it here. Let's see. Yes, here it is. Demand protest, Vicky. Are you familiar with this site? Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard that people are paid to protest, but I didn't know there was a recruiting site for actors.
Well, the thing is some people are saying this is a hoax, so I can't vouch for the site, but it looks pretty legit to me. Demandprotest.com. If you go there, people, it says we assemble movements from grassroots organizations to advocacy groups. We seed the narratives and gather the audience you desire. When your strategy demands paid protests, we organize and bring it to life. So you can scroll down, and it says unassailable authenticity. We are strategists mobilizing millennials across the globe with seated audiences and desirable messages. With absolute discretion a top priority, our operatives create convincing scenes that become the building blocks of massive movements. When you need the appearance of outrage, we are able to deliver it at scale while keeping your reputation intact. So they have different little icons here, the demonstrations. There's a bullhorn. We develop, recruit, manage, and execute on your high-level objectives. Our trained operatives can lead entire crowds or simply steer events in your favor. Movements. We have the proven expertise required to expertly shape political, corporate, or public health perceptions. Intelligence. Our operatives can embrace and steer existing organizations, providing you valuable insights about those involved in their future actions. Training. Our strategists can train your organization in our methods of creating effective demonstrations and design the situations that will deliver your goals. So there's a place for you to put in your email if you want to subscribe, I guess, to their mailing list. And then they say full service. Rest easy knowing that every detail of your campaign is in the hands of experts. They got recruitment. Our top priority is preventing any association back to you. Our operatives only know us, and we have a proven track record of maintaining secrecy. Directed action. We demand action of our operatives on the ground and provide them in-person support. Create the scenes that will sway public opinion and perception without any guesswork. And then they say then they have deniability. By taking every precaution, keeping our clients secret, and only hiring the best individuals, we can ensure that all actions will appear genuine to media and public observers. So they got testimonials here. Partner stories. We drive radical results. 93% of partners launch additional campaigns with us. And they've got campaign chair of unnamed 2016 presidential candidate saying this. We have seen some momentous changes as a result of our first two campaigns. It was astonishing to watch operatives go above and beyond, sometimes to their own detriment. We drive our story with the public. And then this is supposedly a quote from an executive director of an unnamed public health nonprofit. Quote, not only were we able to counter feel-good misconceptions held by millennials, we were able to drive a measurable decline in key metrics and introduce a powerful news story. And then finally they have the chairman of an unnamed fund management. Quote, young Americans were lacking enthusiasm when it came to our goals. Demand Protest was able to formulate a strategy and street campaign that quickly ignited fierce feelings and action. So then they have at the bottom, they have Connect with Us. They have a phone number, which I did verify that it is based in, I think, San Francisco. It's definitely a California number, but it looks like it's in the San Francisco area. And there's an email address here and a form that you can fill in. So, like I say, I can't, obviously there's no way to vouch exactly whether or not this is a real company or a real organization. But it certainly, unless it's a part, there's no Demand Protest LLC, because I did verify that particular company doesn't exist in California, but that doesn't mean that it's not under the umbrella of some other company, or in fact, it's maybe not even a company. So, but it does have apparently a real phone number, a landline, for whatever that's worth. But it's, we know these types of things go on, And this looks like a legitimate website to me. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if this was 100%. Some people were accusing Trump of using this. I would say that it's more than likely the other end of the political spectrum that uses this.
I would think it'd be a corporate PR group, because what I've found in 1990 in the Congressional Record, there is a reveal of the partnership between Dow Chemical and several environmental groups. And I believe that idea of corporations partnering with environmental groups to supposedly save the wetlands, I'm not sure if that came from Europe or whether it was a domestic idea, but essentially that is the idea of buying a movement.
Mm-hmm.
And why did they do that? In 1991, the EPA instituted a program called the 3350 program. And what they did was to set national goals for pollution prevention. And they spoke with industry leaders in the chemical industry, which Dow Chemical, of course, is chemical industry. And they told them that we are setting these national goals, and we will leave it to you as an industry to organize and meet the goals. Mm-hmm. So essentially, it was the EPA who authorized, encouraged, and initiated corporate syndicalization to create a corporate syndicate of the chemical manufacturers to meet pollution prevention goals. Well, and then you have this partnership between Dow Chemical and the environmental groups. One of them was Ducks Unlimited. Another one was Northwest Water something or other. I will have it documented in an article that I'm going to be publishing.
That's
but even
interesting.
As late, and it has continued, by the way, the EPA did that with all sectors of our economy. So, while we are, fighting as individuals to prevent our country from collapsing under this whole international system, we are fighting corporate syndicates that were established by the EPA.
Interesting. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and I do have a clip of Hazel O'Leary talking about it.
So you're going to play a clip?
Well, I can. Yeah, let me find it.
Okay.
I don't know how long it is, but let me...
as long as it's not, too terribly long.
Well, I tend to like to get... I'm pretty bad about that. I tend to grab...
Well, while you're looking for that, I'll just, to kill time, I've got, we got the COVID-19 thing, of course, never going away. Never going away. As a matter of fact, here in Michigan, we have now our governor, Gretchen Whitmer, has now mandated that we all have to have masks, Vicky, whenever we go out in public. We all have to have face diapers.
I already picked mine out. I went looking for it yesterday.
Oh, so you're into the fashion thing?
Yeah, mine is going to be a jock strap.
Very good.
There's some pretty fancy ones out there, that
Boy, I don't think I can top that. But this is here's a montage of the fear factor from the media.
Governors across the country in some of these hotspot states that it's good news, that it's just younger people because they have a better survival rate.
That is a fallacy.
The president also points out the coronavirus death rate is down. That's true for now.
But the death toll, you can't celebrate it right now when you're seeing people heading into the hospital.
Because we've seen this story before. In some ways, it never really ended. In a lot of ways, it is worse than ever.
And, of course, as we see younger people infected and going into the ICUs, it spreads to older populations. That death rate will change.
These people go home. These people infect their parents and their grandparents. Those people get sick. They end up in the ICU, and they either die or they take it from somebody else that could have used it.
So actually, the virus has become more dangerous because it can infect more people. It's more easily able to take root into communities. So it's changing in a worse way.
This is going to be catastrophe upon catastrophe. And just to say, hey, look at the death rate now is extremely superficial.
Does the U.S. need another stay-at-home order?
If the virus continues to rage like this, we have no choice.
The White House and their calculation, this is about trying to instill a sense of normalcy. Then we all know that life can't really feel like it's back to normal. It can't feel
Okay,
American.
did you hear what this guy says? Let me back it up here. Now, this is the media trying to trump up a false threat to keep this thing going as long as they possibly can. It's fear, fear, fear. Be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. You can never rest. You know, you have to be terrified all the time because, well, we have to stretch this out as long as possible for two reasons. Number one, the election in November, and number two, the vaccine. We want to make sure that we keep this going until we have a chance to get to force the vaccine on everybody. So that's what the two major agendas are in my thinking. Some people just put it off on the election. I think it's deeper than just the election, in my view. But anyway, but there's a lot of psychological damage that's being done on the population regarding this. And I think that thing, it's very permanent. I think that's going to go on for a long time.
It definitely will, because it is psychologically scarring the children. I guarantee it, because my whole generation was scarred with the threat of nuclear war.
I think it's not only scarring the children, though. I think it's scarring a lot of the adults. I think a lot of these people that watch CNN and MSNBC, and they turn on these networks and they believe what these people are saying. I think they're being made crazy with all of this stuff.
I know I am.
Well, you're still grounded in fact, though. I mean, a lot of people are not grounded in fact. They don't have any compass. They don't have any roadmap to where they historically all these things. They don't know anything about the media either, and how the media lies. They're still under this assumption that if somebody's on TV, there must be an element of truth to what they're saying.
So we have to ask the question: how does a person arrive at the age of majority and not be able to think? How does that happen? How does it happen that
television,
we have an entire population that follows like a sheep? I mean, how does that happen?
Television. I really believe it's that simple. Mind-controlled television. There's a reason why they call it the stupid box. I mean, people have it. They put their mind in neutral and let the programming filter in. Only there's no filter. It just pours in, unfiltered. And it's sick. It's made the population dumber. It's made the population less moral, because even if you are consciously aware of the values that are being put into your brain, so there's still a certain amount of it that's subliminal, and repetition tends to wear you down too. So you may resist it the first, several times, but over time, a constant conditioning with their values tends to affect your own. It's poison. It's poison for the brain. And I say that as somebody that's made my living in television, you got to make your living somehow. But I'm also aware, and I've tried throughout my career to mitigate damages in certain areas wherever I can affect, be a force for good. I've argued with reporters. I've actually argued with news anchors and reporters numerous times over my career, and I've gotten stories changed as a result of it. But it's disgusting what they're doing to people. It really is. Anyway, continuing here.
Governors across the country and some of these hotspot states that it's good news, that it's just younger, a better survival rate.
That is the fallacy.
The president also points out the coronavirus death rate is down. That's true for now.
But the death toll, you can't celebrate it right now when you're seeing people heading into the hospital.
Because we've seen this story before. In some ways, it never really ended. In a lot of ways, it is worse than ever.
And of course, as we see younger people infected and going into the ICUs, it spreads to older populations. That death rate will change.
These people go home. These people infect their parents and their grandparents. Those people get sick. They end up in the ICU, and they either die or they take it from somebody else that could have used it.
So actually, the virus has become more dangerous because it can infect more people. It's more easily able to take.
The virus has become more dangerous. No, it hasn't. Actually, it's become much less dangerous because the hot weather. People are not getting infected. It only killed less than 0.1% anyway of the people that it had infected. So this whole thing is just bullcrap. But they're just
the community. So it's changing in a worse way.
This is going to be catastrophe upon catastrophe. And just to say, hey, look at the death rate now is extremely superficial.
Does the U.S. need another stay-at-home order?
If the virus continues to rage like this, we have no choice.
The White House and their calculation, this is about trying to instill a sense of normalcy. Then we all know that life can't really feel like it's back to normal. Americans can't feel that they have the virus under control.
We have absolutely zero.
Okay, I stopped it there last time, but I have to stop it there again. He says Americans can't feel like they're back to normal. We can't let the Americans feel like that.
That they have the virus under control.
We can't let them feel like they have the virus under control. I mean, this is the kind of bullcrap the media is shoving out. Go ahead, Vicky.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, something that I've noticed, and I'm sure you've heard of the Overton window, right? Is that what these communists do is that they always begin a story from a designated point. And nothing that happened before, nothing that was said before matters. They begin the story at a point in time. And I noticed that the prosecution of General Flynn was the same way. They only started their story at the point when he pleaded guilty. Nothing that happened before that mattered.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why they kept coming after General Flynn because they set the timeline for the story beginning at the guilty plea.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the way it works.
Yeah, and Flynn is they dropped the charges against him, and now they're appealing that, the fact that the charges have been dropped against him. So he's still not out of the woods on that, by the way.
Yeah, no, I know. It's disgusting.
Anyway, finishing this up.
Then we all know that life can't really feel like it's back to normal. Americans can't feel that they have the virus under control.
We have absolutely zero chance. And by zero chance, I mean zero. Z-E-R-O. Zero chance of moving past this with Donald Trump in that job.
Death rates are going to go up following all of these large infections. And Dr. Fauci, again, is doing what he's been doing from the beginning. He's been telling you the truth, and you haven't want to hear it.
Okay, anyway, did you hear the part where he said, there's zero chance things are going to get back to normal with Donald Trump in that job?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they're just going to keep coming after him and not... They're just anti-Donald Trump.
Well, it tells you that
what he does.
At least part of this is about the election. Mm-hmm. And This is really we're in a bad spot in America, Vicky, when people can't, when they're willing to destroy the country just to win an election. And that's what's happening right now. A lot of the rioting, now I do think it's deeper than just the election, but the election certainly is part of it. Because there's a lot, as you've pointed out, there's a lot of money to be made in elections. And they're willing to do just about anything. So there's a real contest going on between these parties. Now, at a higher level, the country still moves in the wrong direction, regardless of who's in office. But the fact that these contests have become so extremely toxic to the point where they're willing to take down the country. They're willing to destroy our entire country over an election. The outcome.
Well, actually, though, in fairness, there have been plans to destroy our country for a long time. It's
true.
Called the New World Order.
Exactly. Well, that's what I'm saying.
We're just at the end game of are they going to be able to collapse our nation state or are they not? Well, that's where we're at.
What I'm saying is that there's multiple levels to this, and
that's certainly true.
Yes, and at the shallowest level are the elections, and they've gotten more heated and more vitriolic, really. I mean, how else would you describe it? But to the point where, I mean, they're willing to. It's like the Samson option. Okay, you've heard of the Samson option? Samson was the biblical character that leaned upon the post and brought down the entire building to kill the Philistines, but in doing so, he killed himself as well. I mean, this is what the Democrats are employing for the outcome of the election. We'll just, if we can't win, we'll just do the Samson option and we'll take down the whole country with us. They don't care because ultimately that's the goal anyway. Anyway, we're at the bottom of the hour. We'll go ahead and take the break. We'll be back in a moment. Hit the ground running. Stay with us, folks. This is Govern America.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
Welcome back to the broadcast. This is Govern America. The website is governamerica.com. That's governamerica.com. That's the website for the show. My email address is radio@governamerica.com. Radio@governamerica.com. Go ahead, Vicky. Give your information out, please.
Okay, my website is thetechnocratictyranny.com. And my old website is channelingreality.com. And my email address is eyeswideoopen@channelingreality.com. And before we continue on, let me just wrap this part up.
Okay.
I found the video clip, and it's too long. It's 18 minutes.
Okay.
So we'll put it in the show notes. But what Hazel O'Leary said is that she had been in contact with over 700 firms, asking them to voluntarily sign on to this program in the field of energy. So we went from the field of chemicals to energy. And I think that the EPA walked through every sector of the economy, organizing corporations into syndicates to implement the environmental protection agenda that they had that actually began with climate change, with the concept of climate change. And so that, when the government incentivizes something like that, it and gives rewards for corporations acting as syndicates, you're in big trouble as a country.
Yeah.
So.
It's a nasty situation. That's this partnering that's going on everywhere to lock everything down, and we see it in every aspect, in every sector, every sector.
And as you can see with this rent a riot, rent
Yes.
a mob, that would be something that a corporation would do.
Yep.
To further whatever their goals are. And we know that the corporate agenda really is to have open borders for commerce. So what the whole trade agenda did was to separate our economy from the political system.
Mm-hmm.
Except for the EPA with these voluntary agreements to implement a tyranny on the people of this country. So,
yeah, and it's outrageous, and I'm very disappointed that a lot of this stuff that Donald Trump could be stopping, he's helping to further along as well, or at least allowing a lot of it to continue, and that's the big problem there. I mean, where's the lockup order for Hillary Clinton? Why is the Justice Department still fighting Judicial Watch, as Judicial Watch still tries to get to the bottom of this? And by the way, I don't necessarily trust Judicial Watch either, because they came out against the effort to pardon Roger Stone. They came out against him. They're siding with Jerome Corsi. Jerome Corsi and Roger Stone evidently have some kind of rift going. And Larry Klayman came out with emails and said Trump must not pardon Roger Stone. He didn't do a full pardon, but he came out with a
commuted his sentence.
Yes, he commuted the sentence.
And the reason why he did that is because Roger Stone wants to be able to appeal his conviction, because the court was stacked.
Yeah.
There was that one person on the grand jury that had come out against Roger Stone, and then she was selected for the grand jury.
Yeah, John in the chat room says Trump supported USMCA as well, and that is true. And I intend to get into that a little bit as time progresses, because we got a lot of information about supply routes and stuff, supply chains, that I'd like to focus on as well. But finishing up with this COVID-19 thing real quick, we have all the protests and riots going on, yet they're still pushing. One of those people that are pushing for another lockdown, a complete lockdown of the economy, is Democrat Representative Rosa DeLauro. She still thinks everything should be shut down, and, like I say, they're just going to keep dragging this thing out.
Breaking news, Roger Stone breathing a huge sigh of relief.
Okay, that's not the right clip.
For us to keep our people safe, our response needs to be led by the scientists and the public health experts at CDC. Our response needs to be based on reliable public health principles, not political appointees in the White House. It is our expectation that public health expertise must be at the forefront of our national response. We need answers to vital questions. Why has the administration accepted the world's worst outcome and a level of preventable death that would have been unconscionable a few months ago? How is our country going to reopen when there is not a coordinated nationwide effort to test, contact trace, and isolate cases? Why are states disregarding CDC's guidelines for reopening business and for social activities? Why are CDC's guidelines not at the forefront? Why did CDC's guidelines on reopening come after states started to reopen or were already reopened? We are asking the CDC to lead the way.
Well,
no, we're not. And as a matter of fact, there's a case going on up in Spokane, Washington, where a homeless man went to the hospital, and this is the story to the best of my understanding so far. But a homeless man went to the hospital, and he was tested for COVID, and he was found to be positive. They released him to the Spokane Regional Health Department, and the health department, working with the police department, put the man in jail.
Is this Yeah, and I was wondering, is this because, did they do that under the guise of keeping him quarantined from everybody? Is it?
Apparently.
Okay.
So what that means is that you've got a health department in Washington that has been given the authority to incarcerate somebody for a medical condition.
Yep.
Okay, but now here's the thing. Nobody, the police have not filed, one of their arrest reports on him, so you can't get any information on him from the police department, and the health department is saying that they can't release any information about him because it's a violation of his HIPAA rights, or the HIPAA law. So you've got a homeless man sitting in jail who didn't commit a crime, but he's sitting in there for a medical condition on the order of the public health department.
Yeah, that's just wild. And the thing,
that's a slippery slope
yes,
to the same system they have in communist China, where they can just pick you up and send you off somewhere. Nobody knows where you are.
Well, it isn't hard to imagine, Vicky, that
Soviet Union had the same system where they could pick you up and call you psychiatrically.
That's where I was going to go next.
Yeah.
It isn't hard to imagine that in the future they're going to say that maybe you're a little nutty, maybe you're a little crazy, maybe your political posts aren't quite what they should be, and might need to be looked at, might need to be detained, maybe a little bit re-educated.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly what they can do. It happens to be that they're using a homeless man as a test case. Okay, a homeless man, he doesn't have family in the area, obviously. Nobody knows who he is. Nobody knows anything. And the local officials are like a brick wall. So it's really a bad situation, and it's one of those precedent-setting things.
Yeah, you
we
said
can't allow this.
Slippery slope is the phrase that really works here. You're absolutely right. Yeah, it's very scary where we're headed. We also have a very scary economic time coming. Isaac Davis of the Waking Times, he writes, just prior to the global coronavirus outbreak, serious signs of an emerging financial crisis began to emerge. As people were beginning to realize that yet another central bank-engineered bust was coming down on us, we were thrown into a lockdown, shuttering millions of businesses and sending millions of people to the unemployment line. Now, a few months later, we are starting to realize just how deep the economic fallout will be, and Americans are scrambling to adjust their lifestyles to a totally new world order. At the top of the food chain, though, is government, city, county, state, and federal. In the midst of such a bizarre and frightful socio-economic crisis, the tax man is hurting too. Tax revenues at all levels of government have plummeted like never before, and the pain is especially acute for city budgets who've seen sales tax revenue nosedive. While the American citizenry is seeing a drastic drop in income, so is Uncle Sam and all his bureaucratic agencies. Take a look at some of the numbers. CBPP estimates that state budget shortfalls will ultimately reach almost 10% of the current fiscal year, which ends on June 30th in most states, and about 25% of the fiscal year 2021 based on recent economic projections. Kansas estimates an estimated $827 million drop in revenues. Arizona expects revenues to drop by $1.4 billion. Arkansas expects $353 million less in revenue, with $193 million due to the income tax filing extension to July 15th, and the remainder due to lower collections. California expects revenues to decline by $32 billion in 2021 alone, according to the Department of Finance. The revenue declines in fiscal years 2020 and 2021, combined with COVID-19 costs and an increased need for other state services, will result in a deficit equal to 37% of the general fund budget, more than 3.5 times the balance of the state's substantial rainy day fund. New York's tax revenues will fall by $12 billion in 2021 and by $16 billion in 2022, according to the state's Division of Budget. Colorado's revenues could drop by as much as $3.2 billion in 2021 and $2.4 billion in 2022, according to the Legislative Council. For states like Texas, Alaska, and New Mexico, which depend on oil revenue to balance their budgets, the financial hit will be a double whammy. Alaska is projecting an $815 million decline in revenues in the coming fiscal year, and New Mexico could see a $1.5 to $2 billion drop. While Americans clamor to figure out how to make ends meet in their own households, so too government is trying to figure out how to balance budgets, and the reality is that once those emergency accounting measures really begin to sink in, Americans aren't going to like it one bit. The question for mayors and governors will be how much money can we extract from the people without causing extreme poverty and triggering widespread revolt. The answer, of course, is taxes, primarily property taxes, because that's the one thing people are still paying while locked down at home and unable to shop. Notably, Nashville Mayor John Cooper is openly proposing, I think they've already done this too, raising property taxes by 32% in order to correct an estimated $250 million budget shortfall. There's no choice but to have a significant increase in property taxes, he said. Measured in a percent, it's going to be on the order of more than 20% to be sure. Dallas, Texas is looking at a proposed 8% increase in property taxes and is having to work a loophole that allows them to ignore state law, which would prevent them from raising it more than 3.5%. Expecting a $700 million shortfall, Chicago's Mayor Lightfoot, well, I like to call her heavy-handed Lightfoot, she said that a property tax increase is on the table. California is considering a partial reversal of Proposition 13, which would allow a government to assess commercial properties differently, creating an increase in property taxes without actually increasing the property tax rate. Other initiatives include Arizona, where taxes would be raised on incomes above $250,000 to boost teacher salaries, Colorado, which is targeting corporations for at least $151 million in taxes to fund out-of-school learning, and North Carolina, which would issue bonds worth $1.9 billion in part to pay for school capital improvements. New York is pitching an idea of tax increases for wealthier people. New Jersey is expecting to see an unknown increase in taxes as the governor moves to borrow billions of dollars to cover budget gaps. CNBC reports that many states across the nation will be looking at tax increases in many areas, including corporate income taxes, online purchases, excise and sales taxes, property taxes, and gross receipt taxes. They are literally going to drive everyone into poverty, Vicky.
Yes. Yeah,
they're going to force people off their property.
Them, isn't it?
Yes, and I was thinking this fits exactly into the Marxist playbook. This fits exactly into the let's get rid of all private property here, because people won't be able to afford private property except the most wealthy individuals. Isn't that amazing? The billionaires will still be able to pay the taxes.
Yeah. You know what? This is all strategically planned, and I know it is because in 2004 or 2000, I don't know when I discovered this hearing, but in 2004 there was a hearing of the Congressional Budget Committee, and they were kind of in a desperate situation because, as the chairman of the committee said, tax revenues had dropped to the level of 1959, I think, was the year that he gave. Because when they signed the WTO and there was an exodus of corporations from the United States, they took the tax base with them. Okay? Mm-hmm. For every American that was laid off and the job was shipped overseas, that took the tax base away from our government. And, you know, for people that are saying, yeah, rah, rah, well, rah, if you don't have the money to run your country, you don't have a country. And so what they did was make a deal with the corporations. Here again, the syndicates of corporations working against our country. But the Congress made a deal with corporations to repatriate, I forget how many billions of dollars of tax revenues back to the United States so that our government could function.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have a page on that. We'll put that in the show notes also.
Okay.
But another thing that this is, so what this is doing, with raising the property taxes, people, will lose their property or have to sell their property. Another thing, there's an article in Forbes about this being a big boost for digital currency.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're pushing that as an excuse. The excuse for that is that passing around currency contaminates people. You pass germs. Germs
right.
live on change.
There are a lot
and
of
on
businesses
dollars.
here that are saying that there's a coin shortage also.
Yeah, how would there be a coin shortage? I just don't understand how this can even happen. Are they not minting new coins? Is this is bizarre.
They're just pulling them out. They're just pulling them out of the
circulation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So because they need to go to digital currency, because with a digital currency, the scientific management can determine your household budget.
Yeah, every transaction can be tracked. Mm-hmm. It's a technocrat's dream.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because they can control absolutely everything. Okay, now the title of this article on Forbes is U.S. Moves Closer to Digital Dollar. Mm. And apparently on June 30th, the Senate Banking Committee held a hearing on the future of the digital dollar. The pressures to create digital USD are mounting as China recently began testing its own digital currency. So there you go.
Yep, there you go indeed. I'm dropping this link in the chat room for people that want to read it, and as a note to myself later on for the show notes. I do that sometimes.
Well,
I use the chat room as my personal notepad.
What Rosa DeLauro said.
Mm-hmm.
We have to give in to scientific management.
Yeah, dictatorship is what she really should have said.
Yeah, so we're supposed to bend at the knee, bow at the waist for a corporate agenda, because that's what it is.
Yeah, and the thing is it's not real science. It's not real science. That's the whole thing. But anytime you argue with them, immediately they'll say, well, you're arguing with science. You don't like the science. What's wrong with you?
They're right. They're absolutely right. I don't like the science.
I have no problem with science. I have problems with political agendas masquerading as science.
Yeah. Well, all you have to do is go back to 1990 and the climate change agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And what that was is a politicization of science, using science for social purpose. And so you get political hacks masquerading as scientists.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not hard to figure out.
No, it's like the hockey stick. I suppose we're supposed to accept the hockey stick as a real science. The Michael Mann hockey stick, which was based upon faulty computer models, which anything you put into it created a hockey stick. But this was our supposed temperature rise, all of a sudden spiking, despite the historical variations, which the hockey stick chart completely ignored.
And besides that, just the idea of saving the climate. What does that even mean? What does that mean? Save the climate. Manage the people and save the climate. It's insane. It's just absolutely insane. But, it seems to me that when you reach a certain level of insanity, you really don't want to argue with insane people because you don't know what they're going to do,
Yeah, well, that's the problem. They use the fear factor as well. Speaking of arguing with insane people, Mark and Patricia McCloskey, the St. Louis couple who defended their property against the mob of unruly thugs, they're now being prosecuted for acting in their own self-defense. A search warrant was issued just last night at their house, where at least one of their guns that they used to defend themselves was taken.
We want to update our breaking news from the top of the show concerning the couple in the Central West End who confronted protesters armed with a rifle and a pistol. Let's get back out to our Justina Coronel, who is live in the Central West End. Justina, what have you learned since the last time we spoke?
Well, Casey, just to give you some background, at the end of last month, protesters took the streets of Central West End and then turned onto Portland Place behind me here.
Okay, you can't hear her. She's because she's got the stupid face diaper on.
That's when they were confronted by a husband and wife armed with a rifle and a pistol. And tonight, sources tell us police were here and took one of those weapons. Now, in the photos that you could see, Patricia McCloskey with a pistol and her husband, Mark, with a rifle. Now, sources tell us police showed up with the search warrant for those weapons tonight and left with the rifle. Now, we're told the McCloskeys told police their attorney has the pistol, but we've learned Al Lawkins is no longer representing the couple. Joel Schwartz has taken over. Now, he confirms the search warrant did happen and was issued tonight at 8. He won't say what was taken from the home. He says he doesn't know where the handgun is, and he doesn't think charges are warranted. Now, late last month, when this confrontation happened, the McCloskeys told 5 on Your Side they feared for their lives and claimed protesters did property damage on their private street. Now, those leading the march have insisted it was peaceful and they did nothing to provoke the McCloskeys. Now, their attorney says that they're hoping to meet with Kim Gardner's office next week, but no appointment has been scheduled that we know of yet. And, of course, as we learn more information, we'll make sure to update you as soon as possible. Casey, back to you.
So that's the status right now of the McCloskeys. These people are being persecuted for nothing more than defending their own property against a mob of rioters. And
and who makes out on that? The lawyers. The lawyers do.
Yeah, the lawyers do.
They shouldn't be charged with anything because nobody got hurt. And the reason nobody got hurt is because they had guns protecting their property.
Well, if anybody should have gotten hurt, it's the thugs that were trespassing and getting ready to tear up their stuff and potentially even kill them. It's just outrageous how everything has been turned on its head today. All right, top of the hour. Much, much, much more to come in hour number 2. Stay with us. This is Govern America.
Before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order. A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
The councils of government. We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Breaking news, Roger Stone breathing a huge sigh of relief tonight because the White House has just announced the president will commute his sentence. He was set to go to prison on Tuesday, and now Roger Stone will not go to prison because President Trump has commuted his sentence. Short of a full pardon, but still it means that Roger Stone will stay out of the hoosgow. More on that as it comes in.
That was a report from Fox News. Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is the second hour of Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks, and Vicky Davis is here as well. It continues to be the 11th of July, 2020. Lots of things going on here. But that's one of the things that are happening that's good, I would argue. But there are many, many things that Trump is doing, unfortunately, that are not so good. And we're going to get to it in this hour. Vicky, do you have anything you wanted to add? You sent me that article about the Trump going after tax-exempt universities. That's another thing that I think is long overdue. Now, whether or not it's going to be court-challenged, I suspect that it will. But these universities should not be allowed to indoctrinate people with bogus information and certainly spread communistic propaganda, shall we say. There's no question that they are anti-American, and this is a lot of what's going on with all the crap that's in these young people's minds today, and a lot of reason why they're as militant as they are at destroying our country and at destroying our history. Go ahead.
They in these international agreements, one thing that the history goes back to 1975 and signing the Helsinki Final Act. But one thing that Ronald Reagan did was to agree to an education exchange agreement with the Soviet Union, where we would send our journalists, university professors, and others, I can't remember what the third profession was, over to the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union would send theirs over here.
Yes.
And so what ended up happening is what you see. The left built up a power base. Now, the difference between the left and conservatives is that the left is aggressive, absolutely, even physically aggressive. Mm-hmm. And I don't see that from conservatives.
No.
And so you
in fact, the opposite is true. Unfortunately, right. They're a little bit too timid.
Have been basically pushed out of the university system. So all you have are these leftist professors teaching communism and Marxism and social justice and the whole ball of wax.
Yeah.
And not only that, but in this system with saving the climate, what the universities started doing during the Clinton administration is setting up institutes, businesses, nonprofit businesses associated with the universities. And who funds those organizations? Well, corporations do to start out, but they really are profit-making in that, they work with governments for the implementation of this leftist agenda.
Yeah.
And Harvard University is classic. It's at the top of my list of what I would call criminal racketeering, because they were so involved in the redesign of our government. And last I heard, their what is that fund that they have? Anyway, it was worth about $20 billion.
Yeah.
And now, where do they get that kind of money? They got it from the inside information of how our government was being redesigned.
What's disgusting about all of this, is there. Like, here's an example. Okay, you have this college professor, a college researcher at Michigan State University. Stevens, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. It's HSU, so I'm going to guess that's Sue. Anyway, he has been forced out of his position at Michigan State University after daring to show the actual facts from a 2019 study that show that there's no racial bias in incidents of police shootings. Now, we've talked about this before on the show, about how even the Washington Post, certainly no conservative rag, they, in their own study, demonstrated that far more white people are killed by law enforcement than any other race. Okay? It's not even close. It's outrageous, you know. So if there was supposed to be a march for somebody, I mean, it should be for white people, if anybody, because they get far more that are killed by cops. Okay? And unarmed and everything. So, I mean, but no, never a whimper goes on. But this guy was pointing this out, and as a result of it, now he's a racist, and so the university is distancing him, getting rid of him. They forced him out, and this kind of stuff is going on.
Anybody who doesn't follow the company line of the left party is drummed out.
Yes, they're canceled. This whole cancel culture is just an epidemic now, or a pandemic. How's that for a word? That seems to be the word that's favored today. It's just a widespread. It's a rot that's just spreading throughout the entire population, throughout the entire political structure. It's disgusting.
The thing is that universities, in the design of the new way that they planned on this country working, without representation from Congress or a government, they ultimately would like to get rid of government. The universities are the kingmakers. They're the ones that get all the research dollars from the government and from corporations.
Yeah.
Okay, and the universities, the professors use their special station in life with their degree that doesn't mean much to me. I don't have a whole lot of respect for degrees at this point. But they are supposed to be like the center of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And, in terms of using the students to carry on work that we used to have professionals doing.
Yeah.
And they were funded. The one in Boise that I documented, it was funded by a grant from the EPA to get the mayors to form an organization called Treasure Valley Partners to operate as a unit, and they paid the university to do land use planning.
Wow.
And
and land use planning. Let's just let's touch upon briefly why that's a bad thing. I mean, a lot of people would hear, well, you don't want unplanned land use, do you? I mean, that sounds good on the surface. So, can we elaborate a little bit as to why we don't want universities involved in this process? I mean, a certain amount of planning is, I suppose, necessary. But what the problem is you've got leftist institutions and communist institutions. There's the problem. Here's the thing, folks. There is an agenda called Agenda 21. It's the United Nations Blueprint for Sustainable Development. Okay? And sustainable development sounds wonderful, except for one thing. When they say sustainable development, what they really mean is putting the land off limits to you. So land use planning invokes all of this communitarianism stuff, all of this stuff where, I mean, you're dealing with high-rise buildings which are involved or put into stack 'em and pack 'em cities, where you have the businesses on the ground level and your living quarters above that, and everything you need is within a 5-mile radius, so you don't need automobiles, those nasty little, carbon pollutant cars. And so your travel restrictions are, you'll have travel restrictions in place. You'll have transportation abilities will be limited, and all of your options will be limited. But you'll live sustainably on the land. That's the word. You're getting back to nature, even though you don't really have access to nature, except maybe an occasional nature walk on a nature trail that's been very generously supplied to you by your sustainable development masters, your planners. So that's why it's a bad thing. It is because it curtails your individual liberty. It controls every aspect of your life. And cities are being designed right now around that whole concept. So anyway, I just thought a little explanation.
One step under the label sustainable development is the scientific management, allegedly scientific management. And so it's that label, the innocuous sounding sustainable development, that has the entire package of scientific management underneath it. And in your local community, it's the universities that are bringing it into your community.
One thing I'll say, Vicky, people are waking up to Agenda 21, though. And I say that, the reason I know that is because one of the most widely read items on the website, governamerica.com, right now, is Agenda 21. Mm-hmm. Agenda 21 is coming up in search engines, even Google, and it's driving a lot of traffic to Govern America because people are searching out Agenda 21 and they're reading the document. So that's exciting to me. I'm glad to see people finally discovering it, waking up to it, and researching it, reading it for themselves, not taking somebody else's word for it. Mm-hmm. So that's a good thing. And
I'm really, it makes me glad that Trump is looking at the universities, not just, and I hope it's not just for the political environment and all these social justice classes, but they should be looking at it from the standpoint of sustainable development and Agenda 21 land use planning. And the organization in our communities that has been set up, kind of like a board of directors, where you have the partnership of the mayors, you have all of the big businesses represented, the Chamber of Commerce, and your local newspaper, so that reporters from your local newspaper can promote the ideas of this off-the-books board of directors for your local community that is operating for the benefit of those corporations that are members of that group.
Yeah.
And the Chamber of Commerce are the ones that help put this structure together.
There you go. I got your clip here.
Good evening, everybody. President Trump a week ago.
This is Lou Dobbs, by the way.
Served notice on radical Dems and the left in this country that they are often in conflict, often violently, with this nation's values, culture, and law, and that the U.S. government will no longer ignore or tolerate their lawless conduct and often vicious assaults on our heritage, our history, and our people. At Mount Rushmore, for the first time, President Trump confronted corporate America for its sponsorship of the left and its support of socialist and even Marxist organizations and movements. Today, the president took to Twitter, there to call out American universities and colleges and our public school systems, that many of which have become institutions of left-wing indoctrination and propaganda. He took a major step toward undoing decades of toxic far-left programs and highly effective programs of brainwashing and even radicalization of our youth, our students. The president today announced a historic seminal drive to reverse those decades of indoctrination and federal taxpayer subsidy of the institutions that are trying, in many cases, to revise or remove altogether American history and heritage from the curricula of our schools and colleges. President Trump today introduced what could be a transformational effort by his administration. He's ordered the Secretary of the Treasury to aggressively investigate the tax-exempt status and federal funding of liberal institutions that have made left-wing indoctrination of students their priority rather than education. Here's the president's statement today on Twitter. Too many universities and school systems are about radical left indoctrination, not education. Therefore, I am telling the Treasury Department to re-examine their tax-exempt status and/or funding, which will be taken away if this propaganda or acts against public policy continues. Our children must be educated, not indoctrinated. The president's pivotal decision today comes as more than 30,000 academics have signed a preposterous petition against President Trump's ban against visas for foreign students taking online classes. That petition and the left-wing professors who signed it dismiss U.S. citizenship as merely a, quote, artificial distinction between Americans and foreigners.
Okay, so I cut it there. The point is that he's taken action. Let's see if actually he actually follows through with that. I'm sure that there will be legal action against him over this. So who knows if he'll be able to get anywhere with regard to that. But
well, if he does an honest study, and if they report honestly to the American people, I would think that they would have the support of the American people.
Well,
because those foreign workers are taking the jobs that should go to the millennials.
Unfortunately, the American people don't think that deeply.
Oh.
I hate to say it, a good portion of the population, and this includes people on the right too, they don't think that deeply. They don't think past the headlines. They don't think past Fox News or the left-wing outlets. It's really sad. I mean, and about the only honest journalist on TV, in my view. I mean, Tucker Carlson's about the only one that I can see that I bother to watch. And that's not to say that Laura Ingraham can't be good sometimes and stuff. Sean Hannity, I just can't stomach him. But Tucker does a lot of good work, and I don't agree with everything Tucker says either. But the overwhelming majority of the mainstream media, it's just crap. It's garbage.
Right.
And that goes for the left and the right.
Yeah, most of it is not really news. It is opinion.
Yeah,
and that includes Tucker.
That's true. And they've all become just pontificating their viewpoints. You're exactly right.
Mm-hmm. Entertainers. Basically. That's
exactly right. One thing that's not so entertaining, and we've talked before on the show about the fact that there seems to be this agenda to divide the country up, to carve out pieces. Did you see this story about Oklahoma and it being declared by the Supreme Court, half of Oklahoma being declared an Indian reservation?
No, I didn't.
I'm not even sure what the ramifications of this are.
They already had an Indian reservation.
I came across this actually on our own website, governamerica.com. It was one of the headlines there. Linked to it, it went over to Zero Hedge, and I see this: Supreme Court, nearly half of Oklahoma is Indian reservation. This was this July 9th, just 2 days ago. With all eyes were on the Supreme Court's Thursday decision granting New York prosecutors access to President Trump's taxes. A ruling earlier in the day recognized roughly half of Oklahoma as an Indian reservation, in a move which could have wide-ranging legal implications for this 1.8 million people who now live in Indian country, quote-unquote, according to the New York Times. The decision, authored by Justice Neil Gorsuch, holds the United States to an 1866 treaty that the Muskogee Creek Nation, Muscogee Nation, signed with the United States after the Civil War over land which was home to the 5 civilized tribes, the Creek, Cherokee Nation, the Seminole, the Chickasaw Nation, and the Choctaw Nation, according to the New Republic. Today, quote, this is a quote, "Today we are asked whether the land these treaties promised remains an Indian reservation for purposes of federal criminal law," wrote Gorsuch, a Trump...
Federal criminal law?
Yeah.
Wait
apparently.
Okay, go ahead.
"Because Congress has not said otherwise, we hold the government to its word." Joining Gorsuch in the majority were Justices Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and Stephen Breyer, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, while Justices Alito, Kavanaugh, Roberts, and Clarence Thomas argued in the minority, siding with the state of Oklahoma. "A century of practice confirms that the 5 tribes' prior domains were extinguished," wrote Roberts. "The state has maintained unquestioned jurisdiction for more than 100 years. Tribe members make up less than 10 to 15% of the population of their former domain. And until a few years ago, the Creek Nation itself acknowledged that it no longer possessed the reservation the court discovers today." Roberts added that the state's ability to prosecute serious crimes will be hobbled, and decades of past convictions could well be thrown out. That decision today creates significant uncertainty for the state's continuing authority over any area that touches Indian affairs, ranging from zoning and taxation to family and environmental law. It goes on from there, but I'll leave it there in the interest of time. I just think this is very, very remarkable.
It is. I'm going to have to read that because in Idaho a number of years ago, there was a bill in the state legislature to allow Indians to police off the reservation, to become like statewide police, is what I understood that to be. Fortunately, the Idaho legislature voted that down, but there was a movement towards that. And if you think about that, that is a step towards disintegrating the federal government and the entire legal structure under the Constitution, moving to a different system altogether.
Yeah.
And I know that Arizona has statewide policing where they eliminated their borders, and the University of Arizona is in some way involved in that, but I don't have the full story on that. But that's something that does need to be looked at.
It's very alarming to me, and they were saying in the chat room that the United States has never honored any treaty. Well, I don't think we should start with that one, and not at this stage of the game. At the time that it was signed, maybe, but we're way beyond that now.
Well, you know what, and that goes back to what I said about the Democrats and what they're doing, which is to set the framework at one particular date and ignoring everything that came before and everything that comes after, and they just want to look at a narrow time frame. And that's what it sounds like they did with this 1866 treaty. There must have been something that occurred afterward, like maybe the tribal leaders sold the property that they had for the reservation, which they had a right to do.
Yeah, I don't know the history of it. I'll be honest with you, but I think everything today. I mean, if you want to go back, and I said it, I think last week. If you want to go back, if you want to think about all of the land that we are on right now, and you want to give it back to the original owners, none of us would have any property here.
And neither would the Indians, because
that's true, because they weren't here at that time.
Yeah. I mean, they. How far back do you want to go? That's the question. How far back should we go?
Well, it depends upon how far back you have to go in order to destroy the United States as a nation state, because that's really the goal here.
Well, the Mormons, I forget what year this was, but the Mormons had a project to test DNA of Indians, and they were trying to prove that they came from South America or somewhere, but they actually had origins in China. So does that mean really, if we go way back, that China owns our country? Because that's, I mean, you can make an argument because it depends on what the time frame is that you're talking about.
Well, it's going to be something we'll have to keep an eye on. I'm not sure. Anyway, moving along, Trump did an interview with Telemundo. Here's where some of the stuff that Trump does isn't so good. He did an interview with Telemundo where he plans to sign an executive order on immigration, Vicky. And it would include a path to citizenship for the DACA illegals.
And I'm going to be, over the next few weeks, signing an immigration bill that a lot of people don't know about it. You have breaking news, but I'm signing a big immigration bill.
Is this an executive order?
I'm going to do a big executive order. I have the power to do it as president, and I'm going to make DACA a part of it. But we put it in, and we're probably going to then be taking it out. We're working out the legal complexities right now, but I'm going to be signing a very major immigration bill as an executive order, which Supreme Court now, because of the DACA decision, has given me the power to do that. One of the aspects of the bill is going to be DACA. We're going to have a road to citizenship.
Okay, so that's as an executive order, not as a congressional bill.
If you look at the Supreme Court ruling, they gave the president tremendous powers when they said that you could take in this case, 700,000 or so people. So they gave powers. Based on the powers that they gave, I'm going to be doing an immigration bill. One of the aspects of the bill that you'll be very happy with, and that a lot of people will be, including me and a lot of Republicans, by the way, will be DACA. We'll give them a road to citizenship.
Yeah, I wouldn't count on your base being happy about that, Mr.
Yeah,
Trump.
I was just thinking, not this Republican. I'm not voting for him. I'm not voting this election.
Well, I don't even consider myself a Republican.
I'm sick of it. He's lied to us. He said he was going to get rid of NAFTA, and he didn't. He signed USMCA. Obamacare. It went from being repealed to repeal and replace. It's still there. I mean, they got rid of the individual mandate. You could just go down the list. This Trump presidency has been a huge disappointment. It's been a great propaganda presidency, because he stands up there and he says things that the base wants to hear.
Yep.
But then he does stuff like this.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know what's the reason for this. Is he that worried about getting reelected?
He should be.
Yes, he should be. Exactly. And speaking of that, Kanye West, what do you think of him running?
I think that's
rapper?
the most stupid thing I've ever heard.
I don't know that it's so stupid, Vicky. I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. I think it's one of the most brilliant strategies you could ever come across. Kanye West is the black rapper, and he's got a lot of black people that follow him. And how do black people overwhelmingly vote? They typically overwhelmingly vote Democrat. So if Kanye is able to divide or split the Democratic vote, and he wouldn't even have to get that much of the vote, those are votes that are being pulled away from the Democrat side. Now other people try to say otherwise, but I don't think so. Some people are trying to frame this like this could hurt Trump. I don't think so. Kanye and Trump are tight.
Well, that does make sense. It would not hurt Trump's campaign.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he and Trump came up with this.
Being elected are like zero, but splitting the vote is a good strategy. It's
the old classic playbook, you know. Anyway, this is so we got the situation with. Now I'll go back. You know, we got the DACA children, which aren't children at all, by the way. Once again, the media likes to frame them as children. These are grown adults, and they're in the country illegally. Now, I'm sorry if your parents dragged you in when you were children, but you're still here illegally. And
and let's not forget the 1986 amnesty. was supposed to be a one-time thing. Never, ever happen again.
Yeah.
But they're trying to create the free trade area of the Americas, which means the end of borders for commerce. But you can't have a country that has the economy separated from the political system, because the political system will collapse. That's it.
Yep. And the hits keep on coming. President Trump and his team fielded a question about foreign workers. This is a clip I've had a little while ago. I've been saving it, haven't got to it. But this was back during the COVID-19 when they were having regular press conferences for the team for COVID-19. And they fielded a question about foreign workers coming in to work on farms. Now, if you think that's going to stop, if you think he's going to stop foreigners from coming in to take our jobs, well, everybody better think again.
There's been concern among farmers about being able to get enough migrant labor to keep the food supply moving as we go into the harvest season. What are you doing to address that?
Well, at the direction of the Vice President and the task force, we are looking at a number of different options with the H-2A workers that you mentioned on how do we either extend the validity of their visa, or looking at a couple of different options. Nothing to announce here today, but again, at the direction of the President and the Vice President, we're looking at a variety of different options that I think we will have soon, and it'll be very beneficial.
What about waiving
But I am glad you asked that question, because we want the farmers, they've had this for years, we want the farmers to be able to get the people that have been working those farms for years, or we're not going to have farms. So they're going to come in, and they're going to be given a certain pass, and we're going to check them very, very closely, especially over the next month. Because remember, after a month or so, I think once this passes, we're not going to have to be, hopefully, worried too much about the virus. But we want them to come in. We're not closing the border so that we can't get any of those people to come in. They've been there for years and years, and I've given the commitment to the farmers they're going to continue to come, or we're not going to have any farmers.
Is this true? Can we not survive without foreign workers on farms?
Well, I think
I don't
depending
know.
on the crop, strawberries, for example, they do need all those workers. Actually, I think any of the truck farm type products, they do need farm workers, and those are hard jobs. But I mean, we've had this situation forever.
So should we allow illegals to come in?
It should have been solved a long time ago with a special visa for farm workers. I mean,
But these people are being paid slave wages, are they not? And so isn't it a little bit hypocritical for our side to make allowances for farms?
Well, they didn't have to be, but an immigration lawyer actually broke Cesar Chavez's farm workers union. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they should have been paid more. That's hard work. I mean, yes. When I was a teenager, I tried manually hand-picking potatoes.
Oh, it's backbreaking. Yeah, backbreaking.
And, man, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I lasted maybe a quarter of a row, and I said, forget this, But the Mexican laborers that I was working with, they'd gone all the way down the row and were halfway back. And so, I have nothing bad to say about the Mexican farm laborers.
No, I'm not doubting their ability to work hard or their work ethic or anything like that. I'm just talking about what's consistent and what is ultimately in the long run good for our country. Now, I don't know how many of these farms are employing, how many family farms there are employing these workers. Probably quite a few, and could they survive without it? Maybe not. But what to be done? I guess the question is what to be done about it, because I really don't care about big multinational corporations, except that those are the ones that own primarily probably all of the food, all the farms, everything that produces now. It's almost been taken over by the big multinationals, who could afford to pay more, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, but they even went for cheaper labor than Mexican labor. I remember, 2006, 2007, in Yakima Valley, they were importing, some body shop was importing I think they were people from Thailand to pick the apples. And they were doing the Mexicans out of those jobs. So the whole corporate thing, when you have corporations that are running your country, which they do, it doesn't, the economics of it doesn't make sense. It's to break the systems. It's to break the cancel culture. Or culture cancel, whatever the left has come up.
You had it right the first time.
They are destabilizing everything because they are bringing in a new management structure.
Yep.
And the corporations, of course, they're totally behind the scientific management of the country because then they can hide behind the scientists while they are controlling and funding those scientists to say whatever it is that the corporations want said. And you can bet that Big Pharma is behind this whole COVID
no question
ridiculous
about it.
Campaign.
They're certainly, they may not be entirely the engineers of it, but they certainly are in bed with those who are. No question about that. Tell you what, let's go to New York and take a call real quick. Been holding for a little bit. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hey, how you guys doing? This is Paul in New York.
Hi, Paul. How you doing?
Hi.
I'm good. I just wanted to go back to the Supreme Court ruling that you guys mentioned with these Indian territories down, carving up Oklahoma. And I just, remember that I was listening to a podcast like a year ago. And for me to go back and figure out whose channel this was on and who it was with, I don't remember. But they were talking about how Andrew Cuomo, the governor in New York, through some sort of side deal, was facilitating the arming of these Indian tribes down in that territory, like weapons, military-grade weaponry, arming those tribes. So
interesting.
I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Oh, yeah, I would not be at all surprised. I remember Foxconn, or there is a casino there that's right on the border with Connecticut, I believe, that was a phony tribe, not a real tribe. But they declared themselves a tribe, and then the government started treating them like a tribe so that they could have a casino.
That's interesting. Because if that's going on, that changes the whole picture altogether. That makes the whole thing just a complete scam.
Yeah, well, you remember, oh gosh, what was that guy's name? Jack Abramoff? That's originally what caught attention of the public. He was basically extorting money from an Indian tribe, that he then used for political purposes, because the Indians wanted a permit for a casino granted. And so Abramoff was extorting money for them in exchange for the approval of that casino.
Yeah, this is really very alarming. The treachery that's going on. Our country's really suffering from the cut of 1,000 slices.
Yes.
A lot of treachery. Do you have anything else, Paul?
No, I just wanted to bring that up. I just remember this was a while back, and I'd say like a year ago, and that was what it was about. Andrew Cuomo, the governor in New York, and the whole thing was, why would the governor of New York be facilitating the arming of these Indian tribes down south?
Yeah,
and I don't know. So I just wanted to bring that up real quick.
It sounds like revolution to me.
Yeah, I'll see what I can find on it.
Hey, thanks a lot, Paul. I appreciate that. That's a very important point. Thank you very much.
All right, I'll try maybe if I can to go back to be able to go back and find that interview. I listen to a lot of podcasts, a lot of YouTube channels. I'll try to see if I can, because I think that's a very important piece. I mean, Andrew Cuomo arming, with military grade weaponry these Indian tribes down south. Why would he be doing that? But I'll see if I can go back and find the interview and maybe email it to Eyes Wide Open. What is it?
Yeah, Eyes Wide, OOPEN at channelingreality.com.
Okay. I mean, if it means anything, I'll look and maybe I can send it off to you.
All right.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Very good. Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate the call. God bless you.
All right, thanks.
There was a story just a few days ago, as a matter of fact, that a shipment of weapons was discovered. China's shipping in weapons again.
Oh, really? I missed that one.
Did you see that story?
No, that was a few days ago, you said?
Yeah, it was just last week.
Huh. Seems like, I don't know if I saw.
And
I see so many things.
Somebody say that what they do is they ship in parts, only they ship in parts to this location, parts to that location, and then at the gun shows, they bring all the parts to the gun shows, and then people can buy all the parts to manufacture the guns. I don't know if that's true or not, but I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. Boy, I'll tell you what, there's so many things to keep track of today, but I'm trying to keep track of the callers. Let's go back to the phones and talk to Washington State. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, this is Jenna in Olympia.
Yeah, hi. What's on your mind?
Well, I wanted to comment about immigration and the monocrop industrialized food systems that essentially are poison. That type of work is inhuman, and saying, well, Mexicans can or can't come up to perpetuate this industrial scale monocrop food production. It's poison. It's poison for the soil. It's most likely GMO, definitely Roundup ridden. It's not food.
Yeah.
And, the condition for the farmers themselves, too big and will fail. I was looking at the FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act. That's been 2020 was the final say on all these huge-scale farms that they comply. So bureaucrats will be coming onto farms, especially with the COVID, and tracking, surveillance, all of the new tech that they're selling in America.
Well, they've already been on the farms. Actually, they've been doing that for years. And going back to what Vicky was talking about with the corporate tyranny, these corporations like Monsanto, who now are owned by Bayer, but it doesn't matter. They're going to continue. They have been coming onto the farms and inspecting crops, trespassing on people's property, and testing things. And I'm sure you're well aware of this, but they have sued families, sued farms for having their technology in their crops when the farmers haven't even planted their crops. It's just contamination from the pollen that flies from the nearby crops, flies through the air and gets into theirs and cross-pollinates and contaminates their crops. And they've sued in the courts and won. So when you say that these are that it's not real food, the problem, of course, is that there is actually now a risk for people who do try to plant real crops and do try to plant real food, that they could be sued for patent infringement on the crops that they plant when they haven't even planted Monsanto or, these big tech company crops. It's outrageous what's going on here with our food supply.
Absolutely. Even with small-scale farming, anything that becomes commercialized and collectivized will be targeted. Even, I just heard yesterday in Portland, biodynamic permaculture, this whole, growing food as best as they can. Well, the recommendation in the certified organic compost and manure facility just got tested toxic. All of these bigger groups that were doing these workshops and doing localized food, all of the gardens got absolutely contaminated, and there's litigation. It's like it brings it back to the smallest possible scale and understanding backyard gardens and people getting together, friends and family, to troubleshoot and make their way into growing food.
I have to say this.
I see it as like
that will not work at this point in time. Now, where you are in Olympia, it's a relatively small town. But when you think of some place like New York City, how are you going to feed all of those people?
Right.
Unfortunately, we do need big farms, but it's not something that you could immediately say, we're not doing this anymore, everybody grow your own food. That wouldn't work. It just simply wouldn't work. You'd make people starve to death. So
definitely in the cities.
Yeah. Yeah. So we
land.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, she's telling you to go ahead.
Oh, I would. Well, let me tell you about a research project that I read about that's going on here in at one of the schools, I think University of Idaho. They're going to be researching how to extract every bit of moisture out of the manure for and to produce some kind of chemical-based fertilizer.
Well, they're already using sludge, something they call sludge.
Yes.
And this is
probably from the sewers.
Yes. It's a mixture, it's a concoction of chemicals and raw sewage. A lot of people tell me when they put that stuff on the crops, oh my gosh, the reeks. I mean, ordinary cattle manure stinks, but this stuff is it's about the worst smelling stuff you can imagine. I mean, and
they shouldn't be using that for human crops.
It's dangerous. Anyway. Yes, it's very dangerous.
Yeah.
Anyway.
As a matter of fact, I did see a story where a woman wants to do a study. Another college professor wants to do a story, and she wanted to pick out a dorm, a particular dorm at some university, and study the sewage that comes out of there, looking for COVID in the sewage out of this dorm.
Yeah. Well, you can have your COVID right spread on your crops as they grow by using sludge. You can just have it all right there in one spot. So when you can bite into that nice tomato, you can have your COVID with that tomato. Isn't that great?
I think the federal government should stop all funding of research. Stop it all, because it's gotten to the point of insanity. These professors will do anything to get that research money.
Anyway, Jenna, you have anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Hey, thanks for calling. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll talk later. All right, there's Jenna in Washington. All right. And, folks, you're welcome to call in, too, if you want. 610-600-1776 is the number. I don't give it out much because we come loaded for bear so much that it's just getting everything. It's ridiculous how much is going on. But if you'd like to weigh in, you can. 610-600-1776. Our toll-free number, if you don't have free long distance, is 844-646-8376. That's 844-6-GOVERN. As we continue on here, we've been talking about a lot of the treachery of the present administration. Because, listen, if there's anything that we are here, folks, is we're fair. We try to be fair and go after both parties, go after both sides. Nobody's sacred. Everybody is on the table to be criticized when they're not doing the right thing for our country. And Donald Trump is no exception to that. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. And this repealing and replacing of NAFTA with USMCA, which is a document that it throws the door open wide for other agreements like Law of the Sea Treaty, and it's got elements
towards
of the
global government. It's a step towards the free trade area.
Absolutely is, and they're already talking about that, as you've pointed out, Vicky. This USMCA entered into force on July 1st. Trump held, and isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing how fast? This Congress can't get along. They can't do anything. There's gridlock. They can't even agree on a budget. Or what am I saying? Budget. Spending bills. They can't agree on the spending bills. There's no budgets anymore. Silly me. They can't agree on anything, but boy, they can come together when it comes to something like this. Isn't that amazing, Vicky?
Yeah, and it's not a coincidence that Trump said that he's going to sign that immigration executive order giving the DACA students, citizenship.
The children.
The children, yes, it's for the children. We're getting rid of our entire nation, our borders, everything, for the children.
That's right. I got to remember that. Anyway, so as we said, USMCA entered into force on July 1st. Trump held a summit with Mexican President Obrador. I always want to call him a Labrador, but I guess his name is Obrador. Here is Trump in the
I think he's a communist.
Well, aren't they all? Anyway, here's Trump in the Rose Garden talking about the agreement he's going to help.
Working alongside President Lopez Obrador, we're taking this relationship to new heights and building a powerful economic and security partnership. Together we have addressed many of the most complex issues facing our two countries that really went unresolved for many years. Today we celebrate the historic victory we achieved together just days ago when NAFTA was officially terminated, one of the worst trade deals in history, and replaced with a brand new, beautiful USMCA.
Which is just NAFTA 2.0.
Well, NAFTA slashed wages and eliminated jobs.
And this one will too.
USMCA includes groundbreaking labor protections for workers in both nations. This landmark agreement will bring countless jobs from overseas.
Okay, we've heard that before, haven't we? That's the same thing they said about NAFTA.
Back to North America.
Okay, no, wait a minute. Let me stop it there. Did you hear what he said here? Because originally the promise was that we're going to repatriate the jobs to the United States of America. Okay? Listen to what he says here.
Nations. This landmark agreement will bring countless jobs from overseas back to North America.
Back to North America.
Yeah.
Not back to the United States.
Ring your bell on that one.
That's right. Back to North America. We got to get you a bell. Anyway.
I don't know. A bell in my hands might be a dangerous thing.
You get wore out, will it?
Yeah.
We'll just have to make sure it's made in the United States. Made in America, if you can find one that's made in America anymore.
And our countries will be very big beneficiaries. We are already seeing the fruits because it started.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, that's so the goal is to now, in true bait-and-switch fashion, we're originally going to say we're going to bring jobs back to America. What we didn't know, I guess that's true, he's making America great again. We just didn't know that meant Latin America.
Yeah, we didn't know it meant
I guess it's not a lie, Vicky, because we're making America great again. The whole hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
We're almost up to the break already. Let me see if we have time for one more. Will the flow of illegal migrants be stopped under Trump? Here's the question everybody needs to ask.
Our two governments are also in close cooperation to stop the illicit cross-border flow of drugs and guns, cash, and...
Okay, that sounds good.
...contraband, and very importantly, stopping human trafficking.
Human trafficking. Nobody wants that.
We're forging critical partnerships across the Western Hemisphere to combat the cartels and the smugglers.
Sounds good.
And to ensure safe, humane, and lawful migration.
Oh, wait a minute. That's kind of where it goes wrong there. I don't think we want we want safe migration if migration has to happen, but do we want the migration? I thought that's what we were supposed to put an end to.
Yeah, they're just modeling what went on in Europe, submerging the sovereignty of nation states.
Hey, look, Vicky, it worked out so well over in Europe, didn't it? I mean,
oh yeah, really.
I mean,
great.
why wouldn't we want to model it right over here again?
And they're under a communist dictatorship that is a Soviet.
Well, you got a problem with everything, don't you?
They don't vote for those people.
Tell you what, we're out of this hour already. We're going to go ahead and take the break at the top of the hour. And when we come back, we'll hit the ground running. Lots of other stuff. We told you last week they're bringing back the North American Union and the free trade area of the Americas, ladies and gentlemen. Truth of the matter is it never really disappeared. So we're going to have a lot more information in the final hour as Govern America continues. Don't go away.
Before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order. This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
The councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is Govern America, the show that takes no prisoners and has no party or candidate loyalty. We go after them all, ladies and gentlemen. As we continue on here, this is July 11, 2020, third and final hour of the show here, and we're talking about the North American Union and the pending free trade area of the America as it is being built and pieced together along with the UN system and everything else. As we continue, I want to deviate real quickly, Vicky, from where we were headed. I got this clip from Ron, and just to lighten the mood a little bit, if I can find it. I can't even find it now. Okay, never mind. Let's get back to what we were talking about. Before the break, we were playing audio from Trump, and he was talking about how the USMCA is going to bring all these jobs back to North America. And that's not what the people voted him in to do. That's not what people intended to do. We want jobs here in the United States. We want high-paying jobs. We want the flood of migrants, and I don't care where they're coming from, whether they're coming from communist China, whether they're coming from India, whether they're coming from south of the border, from Mexico or deeper down into Latin America. We don't want foreign workers coming into the United States to undercut our labor rates, because they come in, they're willing to work for next to nothing just to be here, and next to nothing is higher than what they're making in their home country, so they're willing to do it. And Americans can't afford to do that, people that have been here and are having to pay.
Our whole infrastructure costs a lot of money. Our wages are based not just on what you can do, but also on the cost of living.
Yeah,
and we have a mature infrastructure.
It's a global race to the bottom is what you create when you do that. When you allow other people, foreigners, to come in, you're undercutting your labor market. And you force the prices down for labor. And that's been going on.
The whole system is neo-feudalism, I believe. With corporations basically turning our country into a plantation.
Yeah, it's been going on since before NAFTA. It started with the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade and the General Agreement on Trades and Services, which ultimately became, the GATT became the World Trade Organization. And but in earnest, these multilateral trade agreements, which were actually separate from the Uruguay round of talks, they didn't like the fact that Uruguay evidently wasn't getting things done quick enough, the Uruguay round of talks. So they decided to put it into higher gear and start having these multilateral trade agreements between nations on their own. And NAFTA certainly was a part of that. And, we have other agreements, and now they're looking at an agreement with Brazil. And that's what Trump has already said. If he gets reelected, he's going to pursue other free trade agreements. So it's just flashback to everything that they were talking about during the George W. Bush administration. And here we have it again. Globalization marches forward. And unfortunately, the overwhelming majority of Trump's base, either they are completely unaware or not deep enough in their research and understanding to understand how bad this is, or they figure they're going to vote for him because there's nobody else to vote for, and we don't want those crazy Democrats in. And honestly, the thought actually crossed my mind, Vicky. I don't think we're going to solve anything through elections, but as insane as things have gotten, I could see why people would want to vote Republican even though they know the Republican Party is stabbing them in the back. Because what's your alternative? Do you want Black Lives Matter and these and Antifa, these powerful terrorist organizations that purport to be about social justice and civil rights, and yet they're wanting to kill people, especially white people? I mean, I could see why people would want to not put the party in charge that is promoting all of that violent extremism.
Yeah, and that's not.
But there's
really
the paradigm that they put you in.
Yeah, that's not really a mistake. And actually, for years and years, I always voted for the lesser of the
two evils. Yeah, exactly.
But it really has been the Republicans that have been at the forefront of pushing this so-called trade agenda, which really has been the Democrats sellout of our country.
The Democrats, maybe to start off with, but I'll tell you what, a lot of this stuff, everything I watched, because I was wanting to see if Obama would pick up right where George W. Bush left off, and he did. I mean, everything Bush was doing on the global scale, as far as advancing globalism, Obama just kept on pushing the exact same things. It was continuity.
And the same was true of George W. Bush picking up where Clinton left off.
Yep.
So the real power in our country is not these puppets that we vote for.
Yep.
The real power is behind them. And I think the State Department actually probably has more power because they've used international trade agreements to circumvent our Constitution, to basically break our form of government and the United Nations agenda. There, I forget what year this was, but there's something called the Vandenberg Amendment. There was, I think, a senator called Arthur Vandenberg, and he put an amendment to a bill saying basically that they were going to use international agreements to implement the international system of law. I mean, those are my words, but that's what the intent of the Vandenberg Amendment was.
Yeah.
Well, is to state that as a policy.
I absolutely believe it, because we can see that that's clearly what they're doing. Here's Mexican President López Obrador speaking through a translator. He's very explicit about the significance of this USMCA trade agreement. A key word here is integration, integration, integration.
It's also important to point out that this agreement signifies the integration of all three countries, because we're all contributing with productive capacity, markets, technology, experience, expertise, highly skilled labor force, and we end up complementing each other. For instance, Mexico has something which is extremely valuable to make this economic integration effective and to boost this integration.
Wait for it.
Economic and commercial integration in the region. I'm talking about its very young, creative, and responsible labor force.
There it is. So they're going to flood the country with Mexican laborers. Surprise, surprise.
And go back to what I told you about the EPA organizing corporations into syndicates. Okay, the EPA is the head of the beast, and the reason why is because of the La Paz Treaty that created the international zone on the border. That was a breach of our sovereignty, a breach of our borders. And who was put in charge of that, quote, framework agreement? It was the EPA. That agreement was signed on the basis of supposedly cooperative effort to clean up the border environmentally, but it put the secretary or the EPA director in charge, and of course, because it's an international treaty, that means that the State Department is ultimately in charge of it, the Secretary of State.
I made a comment on that video that we just played the audio from. I posted it on YouTube. And I was the only one, Vicky, that actually said something negative. Everybody else was praising Trump. I was the only one that said something negative about Trump and what he's doing here.
Now, I wonder how many of those are real people and how many of them are proxies.
Well, what I was wondering is how many of them were multinational corporation people. That's what I was wondering. Because they're the only ones that are winning in this thing.
That's absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
But here's what I said. I said Trump has stabbed us in the back in very much the same way as George W. Bush and Obama did with the Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America. We don't need economic integration. We don't need a North American Union or a free trade area of the Americas. The USMCA is just a reworked NAFTA, and the globalists, think tanks, are already talking about expanding it deeper into Latin America. This is not MAGA. This is establishment status quo. For all of the hype, slogans, flag-waving, and good-sounding rhetoric, Donald Trump is just like the rest. Sing the songs of freedom and patriotism while selling the country out from under you. The European Union was such a miserable failure. Why not try the same thing in the Western Hemisphere? What could possibly go wrong? Nothing for the big multinational corporations. They are the only ones who benefit, albeit at the expense of literally everyone else, especially working-class families. Goodbye, America. It's been nice knowing you. You've been killed by the knife of 1,000 cuts. at the hands of treasonous politicians from both major political parties. Too bad the American people will never know what hit them, because they are too enamored with worshiping personalities, sucking up their lies, while not really paying attention to what those billionaire politicons are really doing.
You hit it. You nailed it.
Yeah, why was I the only one? Mm-hmm. There should have been a flood of comments, but people don't pay attention. They believe, and I'm sorry to say it, I like One American News sometimes, but they're not telling the truth about Trump. They're so far up Trump's hind end, you have to pump daylight to them. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. I mean, they tell the truth about some things, and same thing with Fox News.
Yeah. Well, people have, and I didn't understand this myself. I always thought trade agreements were about trade, so that corporations could just, sell their products wherever there was a buyer. I didn't understand that it really was to build an international system of law for corporations, for the benefit of corporations, and against the interests of the people of a country. Mm-hmm. Basically, people have been reduced to the status of workers, which means slave.
There you go. That's exactly right. Human resources is the term that they like to use.
Yeah,
I should start every show off by saying, hello, fellow human resources. How's everybody doing out there?
And I don't know precisely when this happened, but at some point, corporate profit was redefined to be a public good. So the main public good of government became profit for corporations. And at the point when that happened, that's when we lost our country.
Mm. Yeah, that's very, very interesting, very germane. The Atlantic Council held a conference on the future of global supply chains post-COVID-19. The panelists were Damien Ma, Neil Thomas of Macro Palo, another think tank, Mayan O of the Atlantic Council, and the moderator was Anna Swanson, who's from the New York Times. I got a dog barking in the background. I don't know if you can. He has to have his input too. Anyway, the question came: what can we expect in the future for supply chains as a result of COVID-19?
What are the lessons that companies are actually drawing from the pandemic about the vulnerabilities in their supply chains and the changes they might need to make in the future, if any?
In thinking about, COVID's impact, I think this is a very simple observation, but I also think it's been missing in the conversation. What's affected by COVID is human activity, but it didn't destroy any physical assets, right? Supply chains are basically physical assets, and they're still there. So the capital expenditure there, which is why there's some reason why it's been more resilient than people think. So if you were to ask maybe a Silicon Valley venture capitalist, one solution to mitigate some of the risk is maybe just have more robots and fewer humans in the supply chain.
We want more robots. So that's what we can look forward to. More robots in the supply chain. Because really, Vicky, when you get right down to it, that's all people are anyway to these critters. They're all just robots. You're cogs in the wheel.
That's why they will need a minimum income, a minimum monthly income, and why digital currency is the solution. Basically, they will be the scientists will be defining your minimum level of money that you need to survive, and because they're implementing this whole robotic system for production. So we don't need you in the future. That's it. That's the message to our young people. The future doesn't need you.
We come back to Bill Gates's, Microsoft's patent. publication number 060606, International Patent, which we talked about some weeks ago on the show, where they were having people wear this device which senses your body temperature, your sweat, your thinking, and determines whether or not you're worthy to have your allowance of cryptocurrency. And this is how they're going to control people. And I could see this happening. I can see it developing. I can see it with all these bills. You know, as we talked about the Microchip Protection Act last week on the show, which, by the way, one update on that front. There are other states that have passed it. I looked at some of the language in some of the other states. It wasn't similar to Michigan. The one from Illinois, I'm sorry, not Illinois, Indiana. The one from Indiana was identical to Michigan. So what it looks like our legislators did here was literally take the bill from Indiana and copy it verbatim and introduce it here.
Yeah, I was going to try and look that up at the Uniform Law Commission to see if that's model legislation written at that institute in Chicago.
I'm all for getting ahead of things and making this illegal. I think it's a great idea, but you got to read the bill. And you certainly can't be making allowances for corporations to enforce court orders which facilitate the microchipping of people. I don't want people microchipped, period. Period. I don't care who you are. You should not have to be microchipped.
If that doesn't tell people that if that doesn't tell the public that they have become just assets or liabilities to their corporate masters, I don't know. You know, I run out of words to say.
Well, I don't. I don't. It's tantamount to branding, the same type of thing that you do to cattle.
Exactly. You're exactly right. Yeah.
So he goes on to talk about the existing supply chains. They have their own ecosystems that are really difficult to overcome. What we're talking about here again is how the COVID-19 is going to affect the revamping of supply chains. Now, we know these businesses are not coming back to the United States. I mean, we've already heard Donald Trump, Mr. Patriotism here, Mr. Make America Great Again, except that we didn't know it meant the American continent, not the United States. But so these jobs are not going to be repatriated. But we know from this think tank here, the Atlantic Council, they're talking about the difficulty in removing the friction. They have their own ecosystems. When a supply chain has been built, it's got an ecosystem surrounding it, and that's very hard to overcome and reroute.
But I think what I want to talk about here in terms of the stickiness of supply chains is this idea of ecosystems that can be applied to a lot of different things. But I do think the ecosystem, which economists tend to kind of have done a lot of study called the agglomeration effect, which Paul Krugman has done a lot on. The end result of that is just a very robust ecosystem that's sprung out of East Asia. It's not just China, it's Japan, it's South Korea. And that is a very, very powerful force. And it's very hard to switch out of that. And let me make another kind of simplified analogy. Most consumers individually, you're either an Android person or an iOS person. But most people don't even want to switch from Android to iOS. Why? Because Android is its own ecosystem, and there's a switching cost, which is your time. So think about that multiplied by 150 times, 200 times complexity with an actual high-tech supply chain that's built up over decades. So, and companies are in the driver's seat. They're the ones that built it. It's not governments, right? So companies know that best. So the switching cost there is enormous. And if anything, if you're looking at what's happening post-COVID is what are the economies that have emerged fastest and the best out of it? It's Taiwan and South Korea, it's Japan and it's China. Happens to be the East Asian supply chain that's done really well. So I think the bottom line here is we're actually seeing probably more resilience in the high-tech supply chain than fragility. Now, that is not to say there isn't any risk. There always is risk inherent in any global supply chain. But I think it's a bit counterintuitive for us to actually think about resilience rather than fragility of the supply chains.
So what I'm hearing here is that there's not going to be a whole lot of modification going forward to reorient the supply chains here domestically, unless there's a lot of efforts by the government put forth, and there is some, to be frank, but to uproot the ecosystem is going to be an uphill fight. Corporations will likely continue to utilize the same supply routes that they have historically.
Yeah, well, it's not a mistake that they distributed their production. And they did that, I believe, because it gave them power. Gave them power to be able to tell the U.S. government, forget you, we'll just, we just won't re-import back into the United States. Yeah. And no one single country has the power to regulate these corporations because they are so distributed. See, corporations hire very smart people. Yeah. And what we have sitting in Congress, I hate to say this, but what we have in Congress
they're a bunch of dolts.
Is a majority of morons.
Yeah, they're dolts. Dolts and traitors.
There are some very smart people in Congress, but the majority are idiots.
They're dolts, traitors, and pedophiles. That's what we have. Yeah. Dolts,
and so
traitors,
they don't think this stuff through. And apparently the political parties are the ones that assign assistance to the members of Congress so they can perpetuate this system of control, of corporate control. So
they did mention something that was interesting about Tesla. He suggested that they might be building redundancy into their supply chain, and that might be something these big multinationals began to do. In other words, we could be seeing an emerging trend in the establishment of supply chains so that if something goes south, if something goes bad, then they can turn around and reorient very quickly.
Tesla, I would argue, is actually fairly successful.
I guarantee you they already have it. Corporations think that way. That's the way they think.
Well, you almost have to, I guess. I mean, if you really want your business to not be affected.
Tesla, I would argue, is actually a fairly successful story of U.S. industrial policy because, I think people forget on initial stages, it actually got a loan from the Department of Energy for it to kind of survive and keep on scaling up. And now it has scaled up, and it's in China for a lot of reasons, but one of which is that China happens to be the biggest EV market right now. And so supply chains tend to migrate toward where end demand is the most robust. And so there's no other bigger market right now for EVs except for China. And another important factor is that for the first time in many decades, China has allowed a wholly foreign-owned enterprise, a WOFE, to be set up in the auto sector, which for a long time it was always 50-50 JVs. So you couldn't go in alone if you were a foreign auto manufacturer, but they allowed Tesla to go in alone. If the interest is in having lithium-ion battery manufacturing in the United States, Tesla is the only player in town that's doing that. So if you look at our data, U.S. is about 10% of global lithium-ion battery market share. That 10% is almost entirely Tesla. China is 60% in terms of batteries. Right, so Tesla is the only game in town. So there's a dissonance between what the markets were saying and what kind of our national interest may be if we wanted to have lithium-ion batteries. So it's interesting what Tesla is doing. I can't read their mind. I don't know their strategy per se, but based on what I'm looking at is I think they're essentially trying to build out a parallel vertically integrated supply chain in China. That's kind of very similar to what they already have in the United States. And that could be a possible strategy forward in mitigating supply chain risk is that maybe, in the future, they're going to build out a parallel vertical supply chain in the European market because that's another big EV market, already has a fairly developed manufacturing ecosystem. So you kind of have vertical integration in these markets that have strong ecosystems and a little bit parallel across the board because it's the same company. So that might be a way. So, for example, if the European one goes down or gets disrupted, you still have the China one and you still have the U.S. one. Again, I'm not saying that's what Tesla's thinking, but it looks like that's what they're trying to do in Shanghai and in China. And so that could be a potential strategy going forward. And that's why we found it to be interesting in both as sort of the only player that's at scale in the United States. And it's also in China, and it's probably going to, and it's a cautionary tale of if we don't get the incentives right, Tesla could, switch to a Chinese battery supplier, CATL, which is now the world's largest battery maker. And they make batteries that are probably just as good as Panasonic, which is what Tesla has been using.
What do you think of that?
That's the way it should have been set up from the beginning. I remember there was an Indian economist. I can't remember what his name was, but he wrote some great papers about the global organization of corporations and how when they distributed their supply chain and they produce one component in this country and another component in that country, spreading it all around the world, it deprives the countries that they're doing business in of the benefit of economic activity of that corporation. And it deprives the people in that country of the development that comes from having a fully integrated business operating in their country. Okay, now you take a business like General Electric, for example. As they grew in this country, they had their different production lines, but they also had their research and development and just everything. I mean, it was like a totally self-contained corporation, and the people in this country benefited from having that big corporation operating in our country. But when you take just one little division and you produce one little component in one country, it really gives the country nothing. It gives the people nothing. It gives the shareholders of the corporation, it gives them guaranteed lock on the enslavement of people all around the world. Mm-hmm. And that's really been the objective of this whole corporate structure.
Yeah.
People as slaves for corporate profit for the very few who benefit at the top.
Tell you what, let's go to the phones. We have a caller on the line, and when we get done with this caller, we have more information about supply chains and supply routes. There's Vicky discovered a strategic and international studies panel discussion on the subject as well. It's interesting that they're all talking about this now. So I guess it makes
no mistake.
Yeah, no mistake indeed. All right, let's go to New Jersey, I think. Let's go ahead and take the call. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, don't you have a break coming up soon?
Nope, skip the break. Too much stuff to talk about. Go ahead.
I wondered, did you see or hear about the lawsuit that an Indian tech worker filed against Cisco because the Indian workers there above him have discriminated against him because of the caste system and how they've implemented a self-contained caste system well, they mentioned Cisco, but I know it's industry-wide.
Yeah, we talked about that last week, I think.
Yeah, I did hear about that, and that's really very interesting. That also happened to a guy that I knew when I was researching outsourcing and all of that. He was just a regular American male. I don't know if he was white or black or brown. I don't know what his race was, but he filed. There was an Indian that was hired ahead of him, who was in the country on H-1B, and he filed an EEOC complaint, with the federal government. And what the EEOC's ruling was that there is no protected class called American. So apparently for the EEOC to have any protection at all, you have to be specifically named. So I was thinking about that in terms of this case with the caste system. How many different castes are there in India? Because you'd have to have a special protection for each caste.
That's interesting. I thought there were like 3. No, you know what? There's a pyramid. There was a pyramid. I saw that. I think it's. I just was looking at this.
There were over 100.
Not according to
five major.
Go. What'd you say, caller?
There are 5 major caste systems.
Okay, that's what it was. Yeah, because I was looking at this pyramid on a website somewhere, and they were breaking it down. Yeah, I think it is 5. I don't see the pyramid now. You can never find things right when you need them.
And ironically, speaking of tearing down statues, Gandhi, and I appreciate the work that he did to free India, but he wanted to. He proposed another caste system under the major ones, which would have been called the unthinkables. He was,
and what would be the idea?
The unthinkables?
The unthinkables, yes. And these were below the untouchables, below the Dalits, as it's called.
Yeah.
And because talking about getting into someone's history, he was not exactly the great lover of humanity that we think he was. And he was a human being, so he was not perfect.
Right.
But it got to the point where even Martin Luther King's widow, had to be briefed on why she supported building a statue of him in Washington. Incredible story. Human beings are just a piece of work.
Well said.
Can't argue with you there.
Well said.
All of us, we're not perfect, and we try to make everyone else perfect. And in the case of Gandhi, again, I think if this worker doesn't win this case in California with Cisco, then we're going to see the further implementation of this caste system amongst the Indian community. And it's already been coined the Indian Mafia, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, this whole thing is just terrifying. It's terrifying. And this has implications for so many different groups of people.
Yeah, so we're just we are importing the social and cultural problems of everybody in the world.
Yep.
This will be the land of Babel.
Which is really the opposite when you think about it. It's the opposite of a melting pot. They claim that this is a melting pot. Melting pot means that you mold together. It means that you are that there's conformity there. There's no conformity here. It's like mixing oil and water. You know, there's no conformity. I mean, they're not assimilating.
Well, they've even imported a separate form of government. Islam is a separate form of government.
Yeah, and this Indian caste system.
It's not a religion. It is a political system.
And this Indian caste system is the same deal. So yeah, it's the whole thing is to try to divide, balkanize, create divisions, so that it makes it impossible for things to function. You know, we talked earlier about that whole deal with Oklahoma and the Indian reservation. It's the same kind of deal, I think. It's it's allowing people to hold on to what has been things of the past and not operate within the same realm, the same system. And you do enough of that, and you get to the point where literally as a nation you can no longer function. And I think that's the goal. I think that's what they intend to do.
It most definitely is. And where there will be resolution will be at the continental level, the hemispheric level, by a Soviet board of directors. That they won't be elected. They will just pass down their edicts and to the slaves.
Yeah. Hey, caller, thank you so much for calling. You have something else?
Just very quickly. Do you remember, and I think I saw the report on your site many years ago, about a Russian social scientist who wrote an article called The Balkanization of America, about where he's been pretty accurate so far, talked about how America would look years. But it seems like...
You dropped out there briefly. I think what you said is how America would look in the coming years. And I think I know what you're talking about. Go ahead.
It was a Russian guy, right?
Yes.
He said was it a Russian?
As I recall, he was a military official. He was a high-ranking military official, and he was talking about dividing the country up, dividing the United States up. He envisioned it to be divided by regions in the coming years.
And what do we have in the Pacific Northwest? We have the Pacific Northwest Economic Region that includes 5 states of the United States and the Canadian states just above. And I know they are planning on redefining that area to be like a new state, but it's not a state, it's an economic region.
Yep, there you go. Hey, thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it.
What was the name of that article again?
What was the name of the article?
Yes.
Which article?
Did you?
I don't have the headline. If you're talking about the one that deals with the Russian official, I don't have that at the ready. I'll see if I can find it, though. If I can find it, I'll put it in the show notes. Okay?
All right. Thanks very much.
Hey, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving along here, we want to get into this supply chain stuff from the Centers for Strategic and International Studies, Vicky. They're also talking about supply chains. The event was called An Opportunity to Build Economic Security in the Americas. Because don't we all want economic security, don't we? You're not going to do it by reinventing NAFTA and putting it upon the people. But anyway, this is Annabel Gonzalez, the former Minister of Foreign Trade for the government of Costa Rica. She says that big corporations were already pivoting away from China due to the trade war, but it doesn't sound like they're going to be moving back en masse to the United States.
The evidence suggests, for example, that multinational firms had already been moving some pieces of their supply chains, for example, such as boilers and machine tools, away from China and into Mexico in response to the ongoing U.S.-China trade war. Well, then comes COVID-19, and with it, severe disruptions to trade and to supply chains. Forced reduction in production as a result of containment measures, steep decline in demand in sectors such as automobiles and textiles. So COVID-19 is confronting many multinationals with the need to rethink their supply chain strategy to protect against the vulnerability implicit in very long supply chains or production networks that are highly concentrated in one country or region. So firms may opt to shorten supply chains by reshoring back to their countries. And in some sectors like pharmaceuticals, for example, there's a push for greater localization. Now, recent research shows that renationalization of supply chains in general does not make countries more resilient, but political factors may push in this direction.
So, again, we know from Trump's USMCA, they're not coming back to the United States. If they come back to the America at all, it'll be Mexico. The American
you know what I thought was interesting in what she said is that she's talking about supply chains for manufacturers, but this whole COVID thing has kind of messed things up. Well, the COVID thing is an agenda of big pharma.
Yeah.
So basically you have big pharma messing with the business plans of the manufacturers.
Yes.
And that really,
ironic.
It's huge in terms of the potential for disharmony in the world, where you'll have one corporate sector, business sector, potentially going to war with another business sector.
Right. There's always infighting. And that's the one good thing about this. This plan for globalization would have probably been wrapped up and all done, fait accompli, except for the fact that the other side can't get along with each other. Even with all the money they have to pay people to implement things, they still can't get past the fact that they all want the same kind of control, and they all are competing for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they can all hire their own rent-a-mob to promote their objectives. I mean, it's guaranteed chaos from here on out. There will be no peace ever anywhere.
Now, she goes on to list the options available to multinationals, which include nearshoring, and regionalization of their production.
Now, the other option, of course, that firms have is to diversify production, location, and source suppliers with alternative business models here. Firms may focus on nearshoring as a cost-effective way of shortening supply chains and improve risk management, particularly in some sensitive sectors. They may also look at increased regionalization, following the case of some value chains that are mostly regional in nature, such as in the case of autos. And global value chains will also continue to prevail in some sectors, such as apparel or other low-cost supply chains.
So there you go. Now, this is Juan Carlos Baker Pineda. He's the former Undersecretary of Foreign Trade for Mexico. He's talking about trends in trade that will lead to policy and the USMCA, which just entered into force, as we said earlier, on July 1st.
It is true that the USMCA was negotiated before the COVID-19 situation, but nonetheless, the dispositions, the disciplines that are included in this new agreement to a very high degree reflect what is the current thinking regarding supply chains, regarding the need to create some new disciplines to tackle some of the issues that are more and more important for the trade world in general. So, for example, one of the things that the USMCA has, it's a very strong emphasis on bringing back manufacturing production into the region. As has been very well documented, some of the chains, especially in the automotive sector, the electrics and electronics, textile and apparel, footwears, and other similar products, some of those industries were really locating in countries in Southeast Asia as opposed to countries in our hemisphere. Now, given that the new vision regarding trade that it's coming out from Washington emphasizes that those investments and that production need to be taken back to the hemisphere, well, it's only natural that in order to accomplish that, the new rules of origin will have a higher degree of regional context so as to accomplish precisely the objective of bringing back that manufacturing and those investments. And the U.S. administration, this is a trend, I must say, that I believe that is going to continue for some time. I believe that the idea of these very large, broken down, atomized supply chains really is something that will change, and we are not really going to see those very long processes spread all over the world anymore, at least not in the sense of what the U.S. trade policy is emphasizing. Some of you may have seen an article that Ambassador Robert Lighthizer, the head of the USTR, published very recently, in which he outlines very clearly the way that he sees this trend going, and especially the emphasis that the U.S. is going to put into pursuing those objectives towards other countries in the region as well. And having said that, I think that the USMCA certainly is the first agreement that reflects these new conditions, but I do not expect it to be the only one that does. I believe that we are going to see a movement in terms of crafting or updating, if you may, the rules that govern bilateral trade of the Latin American countries with the U.S. To look more like what the USMCA is going to look like right now.
So he's arguing that the goal of the USMCA was supposed to be a repatriation of business production back to the hemisphere. That's what he said. I thought the goal was to bring it back to the country, not the hemisphere. So the globalists have decided to refocus their energy on ramping up the North American Union. It never really, like we said, we never really left. We sound like a broken record, but it's being ramped up under the new USMCA trade agreement. And actually, Vicky, I was thinking we should be calling these B-trade agreements, not free trade agreements.
B-trade being what?
Betrayed agreements.
Oh, betrayed.
That's what it really
good.
should. Yeah, this is what we should be calling them. Betrayed agreements.
Yeah, I like that. And that's exactly what they are.
Yes.
They were misrepresented to the American people. We were propagandized. I can't tell you how many fights I had online about free trade, because there were corporate trolls out everywhere in 2004, 2005, 2006. It was a war on the internet.
Yeah, I bet it was. You against the multinational shills.
Yeah. I'm a fighter.
Because all the other people are not paying attention. They're thumbing their nose at worshiping politicians and the feet that the ground they walk on. What is it about charismatic personalities that make people just about drool all over themselves over these people regardless of what they do? That's the thing that just blows me away. All right, a little more from Carlos on the USMCA. Just like the former trade representative Carla Hills, which we talked about a lot, she was saying that NAFTA was outdated, needed to be updated anyway. He's saying the same thing.
It's important to bear in mind that the NAFTA, as we had known it for over 2 decades, almost 25 years, was already lacking some elements that were necessary for companies to thrive in the 21st century. And just to give you one quick example, the NAFTA, the original NAFTA, does not speak at all about e-commerce or the digital environment, because the agreement was negotiated back in 1994. So fast forward towards 2016, 2017, and all of these situations really also implied that the rules that govern the bilateral trade between Mexico and the U.S. and Canada, of course, needed to be revamped. That is already producing some very good results in terms of trade. Last year, 2019, Mexico was the U.S.'s main trading partner with a record trade of over $615 billion, which is an amazing amount of trade, considering that just a few years ago, Mexico had been displaced all the way to the fourth post by countries such as China and others, including Vietnam and other Southeast Asian countries.
Okay, so I don't know if you have any comments on that, but if you...
Well, just to say that it was George Herbert Walker Bush who kicked off negotiations for NAFTA, and the ultimate plan of the New World Order is this reorganization under an international system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that is the New World Order.
Absolutely.
So anybody who is supporting free trade, frankly,
you're a globalist. You're a globalist. You're a globalist. You're a globalist. You're part of the problem. That's exactly right. Miguel Braun is an advisor to the Center for Strategic and International Studies. He's reciting the familiar argument that the USMCA will save Latin America.
Latin America has basically failed to develop over the past decades. And this is...
Wait a minute. I thought NAFTA was going to help Latin America. Why would it fail to develop, Vicky? Why would that happen? Are they saying that NAFTA was a failure?
Tragedy. I mean, there's over 6...
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, never fear, the United States will bring in all kinds of money for development. So the other countries don't have to do anything because the U.S. taxpayers will pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Latin America has basically failed to develop over the past decades. And this is a tragedy. I mean, there's over 60 million Latin Americans living in extreme poverty. And this is something that more global integration, more investment, etc., would help to overcome.
Sure. So global integration has failed up till now. So let's do more of it.
And this is bad business for the U.S. as well. I mean, illegal immigration, terrorism, the drug trade, etc., feed on poverty, on weak institutions, and on corruption. So basically, a less developed Latin America is bad business for the U.S. And looking forward in the competition with China, we risk having Latin America become sort of a geopolitical hotspot for, testing struggle between the U.S. and China. So when we look at this medium to long term, it would make a lot of sense, of course, for Latin America to develop, but also for the U.S.
Look, so it's the same failed policies all over again.
And the same extortion racket, give us money or we'll go with China.
And the same arguments that sold us NAFTA. Do they think we have no memory at all?
Yes.
Unfortunately, they're right for many people. It's sad, but it's true. People don't pay attention. And rah, 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 my candidate, rah, 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 my president, best president ever. That's my favorite phrase, Vicky. Best president ever.
Yeah.
You idiots.
And we look at North Korea and see that they have a cult of personality over there with Rocket Man. And what do they think we have here? What do they think Trump is?
Yeah.
He's a rocket man too.
We got two people. We got two different breakdowns of people. We got the people that worship the Orange Man, love the Orange Man. The Orange Man can do no wrong because you don't want those crazy Democrats to take over now, do you? Well, no, we don't want that. But then you got the crazy Democrats who, hey, there's nothing the Orange Man can do. Hate, evil. Destroy. And nobody can see that you're both being screwed by whomever is in office. It's maddening. Anyway, continue.
For Latin America, this, of course, would be great. Latin America wins because it receives much-needed investment and technology to boost its economy. It will also expose Latin American companies to international standards, which are increasingly fundamental to be competitive in the global economy. So a free trade agreement is clearly a win-win proposition.
It's a win-win proposition. All right, let me dump out of that. I can't take any more, Vicky. Let's go to your final clip, the one that you really wanted to have played. This is Earl Anthony Wayne of the CSIS on linking hubs together.
I think, as Miguel correctly said, the most important opportunity, perhaps new opportunity, is Brazil. And you have a government that is now more open to having a trade agreement with the United States, a more serious trade agreement. There are talks underway, serious talks on a phase one agreement, which is looking largely at trade facilitation issues and regulatory issues, with the idea that you might, after that, get into something that looks like a broader, more well-rounded trade agreement. The other idea, which is a variation of what Miguel was talking about, is to build off of the existing FTAs between countries and the United States, both to update them, but maybe to transform them so they're not just the hub and spoke arrangement that we currently have, but rather to interlock them so they're bringing benefits among a wider group of partners.
Got any comments on that? I'm sure you do.
Yes, I mean that's how I knew that they were moving towards the FTA. Even before I knew about the USMCA coming into force, I heard it in what he was talking about, because the global system is designed around hubs, but it's not just transportation hubs; it's also within the cities around the universities. This whole global system, it is a system. It's a designed system. You could call it scientifically designed if you want to. I figured it out, and I'm not a scientist, but I can tell you that it is a designed system for globalization, and it is ultimately collapsing nation states just by the nature of it, because they realign loyalties they realign economic viability.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you separate your economy from your nation state will collapse because they need money to operate.
Yep.
So, you know, it just...
Yeah.
It's all out there if people just look at it. I don't understand why there aren't more people looking at it.
Dig through our show notes.
Yeah, John Birch Society does the best job, besides myself, of people looking at the structure of it, the design of it, and how it's been implemented step by step.
There you go. Exactly. And it doesn't matter who you vote for, ladies and gentlemen. Both parties are on the take, but that doesn't stop the other side from trying to do voter fraud, as they seem
to. Some people are even getting flyers in the mail to register. But Ron and Carol Timms say there's no way their cat is going to the polls. When Ron Timms checked his mail Wednesday, he found something for Cody Timms. Cody doesn't get much mail. Cody is a cat. He died 12 years ago. The family keeps his ashes in this green container.
A great cat, indoor, outdoor. Loved his family, loved the neighborhood. He was 18 and a half when he passed away.
Okay, so I'm going to dump out of it, but he got a voter registration card in the mail, apparently. So a voter registration application, I should say. So that must make him a Democrat.
There you go. The whole Russian hacking thing started off with a voting issue, the nationalization of voter registration. So what does that tell you?
There you go. Tells you a lot. Those that count the votes decide everything. Those that cast them decide nothing. But there's going to be a lot of people casting votes that don't deserve to cast, multiple votes. Anyway, we got to go. We're out of time. Thanks for being with us, ladies and gentlemen. Tell somebody about the broadcast. Pray for this republic. Do what you can to restore it. God bless each and every one of you. And thanks as always, Vicky. Appreciate everything you do.
Okay, thank you, Darren.
Join us back here next week. Same time, same outlet. God bless you, folks. And we'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.